Susan Gardner here from Municipal World. We're in beautiful Quebec City this week. And joining me in the Municipal World Media Center is City Manager for the City of Ottawa, Steve Kanellakos. Welcome, Steve.
Thank you, Susan. Great to be here with you.
So, thought this would be a great opportunity while we're both in Quebec to have a chat about what's going on in Ottawa.
There's lots going on in Ottawa. We've been a city that unfortunately has been affected by a lot of natural disasters over the last 3 years. We've had our second flood in 3 years. We had a tornado. We had a tornado last fall. We had a major sinkhole. When I arrived back in Ottawa about 3 years ago, I was just on the job about a month, and we had a major sinkhole at one of our critical intersections right in the downtown core near apartment buildings. Related to our light rail system. So the city has been dealing with a lot of grief, a lot of stress, a lot of people who have been displaced and have lost their homes and have lost everything. And it's been a real test for our organization to be able to not only respond to the disaster, but deal with the recovery operations after. And we've learned a lot from it. Unfortunately, we're getting really good at it, and I'm hoping that we don't have to do it again. But something certainly is happening with water. The floods are becoming more prevalent. To have 2 floods in 3 years of this magnitude, and I grew up in Ottawa, I've never seen that before in my entire life.
Was Ottawa one of the cities that's declared a climate emergency?
Yeah, we did. We just actually, council just passed a motion about 2 weeks ago declaring it a climate emergency and ramping up those efforts. I think people are recognizing that something's different, something's happening. A lot of people who have lived in those areas that got flooded for the second time now have been there for years. They've had cottages there, they've had summer homes, people have rebuilt, and as many of these nice areas along the water, people build their dream homes there. And unfortunately, I don't think they ever expected that they get flooded out. They called it the 100-year flood 2 years ago, and people said, "Well, what happened now? We got another 100-year flood in 2 years." So something is definitely happening.
It definitely is. So for communities, there's some communities that are still kind of on the fence about, do we declare a climate emergency? Don't we?
Yeah.
What's the point? Do you have any sort of insights or advice for them on?
Well, I know there's a lot of debate about, climate change and climate emergency. So especially when you're dealing with it in a political environment, and you have large councils which have very different views about climate change, and whether you should be declaring and making even statements on a broader perspective about, are you a sanctuary city? Are you claiming a climate emergency? And councils have taken different positions on that. Some of our elected officials and in other cities have felt that it's not the city's role to be getting into things that are at the provincial, federal level. Stay in your lane and deal with it. And there are other councillors elected officials who believe that no, cities are where it's at. That's where change starts. You have to make a statement. Our mayor and our council felt that making the statement that we had a climate emergency was important based on everything that's been happening in our community. And they also felt that it sends a signal to the organization that this is a priority and we have to pay attention to it. And everything we do should be looked at through the lens of a climate emergency. And staff were very supportive and are very supportive of this.
That's fantastic. And it's pretty hard to ignore when the water's rising right up on your doorstep, right?
Well, it's an awful thing. I toured the sites. I was actively involved. We went for about 21 days straight, working literally around the clock, and then the waters just kind of stayed high. It was unusual this year in that they didn't recede as fast as the 2017 flood, and we haven't been able to start our recovery operations. So we went hard for about 3 weeks on trying to prevent people's homes from flooding, sandbagging, organizing the volunteers. We had about 15,000 volunteers come out filling sandbags. We filled 2 million sandbags, believe it or not.
Wow.
And so now the issue really becomes the hard part happens now, because as the water recedes, people are left with the disaster in their homes, the cleanup, removing 2 million sandbags. What do you do with them? They're contaminated. The plans for that, the debris management, the mold, the health issues, all those things now. The only good thing about the water not receding, it's given us a couple of weeks to really lock down our plans for how we're going to roll in. The military, we called them in. We declared a state of emergency. I recommended that to the mayor because I felt this time compared to last time that it was going to be worse. And I really felt that our volunteers and our staff couldn't sustain, when I was looking ahead and the advice of my senior team, we couldn't sustain the effort for multiple weeks with our own staff and our own community, which is too much. And the military arrived within hours of us asking them. And a lot of people like to bash, large institutions and criticize, our federal government, but they were amazing. The soldiers that came in their command structure really helped put us over the top. It made a huge difference that first weekend they arrived, and I'm a huge fan and admirer of just how they came, and their motto was, "We just get it done." And
They
I'm
step
a big
up
fan.
when
I'm a big
it's
fan.
required.
Absolutely.
And I think the point about there being a limit to the capacity that your organization has to step into the gap and continue other city operations.
People are exhausted, and what happens is you're on a I think for a lot of us, like you're on this this path in terms of implementing all the priorities of the organization, all the council direction. There's a lot of work that's happening. We're a large city, 17,000 employees. We're 2,800 square kilometers. We're a large city geographically and just from even the staff size. And all these things are happening, yet an event like this diverts all the attention of the organization and almost everything else stops. And I think what our staff are feeling now and our council is feeling is that everything kind of slowed down, even our spring cleanups, street sweeping, all the all the debris management, everything that happens typical spring to get ready for summer, it got delayed because most of our public works people, who are heroes in this too, have been working around the clock, and they're burned, they're tired, and many staff were tired, and we were trying to cycle them out to give them a break, but then the regular work is still there. And the trick to it all is how do you get the organization back on track after coming out of an event like this?
Yes.
We're hitting summer, people want to get their holidays, they're realizing their holidays are going to be delayed. It's had ripple effects through the whole organization.
So what is the answer to that? How do you get your team back on track after you come through a thing like this? I think you've probably got some insights there.
No, it's a very timely question, because we were just talking about it 2 weeks. We started having discussions about how do we peel off responsibility areas to allow the recovery operations for emergency operations to continue, yet peel off and bring people in that maybe wouldn't have been in a leadership role at that level to start leading the spring cleanup and the regular work. So we pulled off some of our most senior experienced people to work on flood. We've now been bringing in kind of that next generation of leader, and we're saying, okay, you're now, you haven't had the responsibility to do the roads cleanup and get ready for spring and summer after we had a really tough winter, by the way, but you're now going to lead that. So we brought a young manager in and said, you're now in charge of taking that on, and here's your new team, and going. There's some risk in that, but we had to really start drawing on our entire resource pool and give people an opportunity to step up and do the regular work while we did it. Because council too, I mean, from there, a lot of the councillors who weren't affected by the flood, their residents were saying, well, I haven't seen a sweeper, I haven't seen, a pothole crew, I haven't seen, and there's a pressure that builds in the
Yes.
organization, and you have to respond to that. So our senior leadership team got together and we said, you know what, we need a plan, and we need a focus on those efforts, because we can't slide anymore. We've been too distracted.
Yeah. And what role does communications play in all of that?
Well, the thing about emergency management, these disasters, is they ultimately always turn into a communications exercise. I mean, that's
It's really core, right?
It becomes at first it right from the opening moments when you're making the decision about when you're going to have that press conference with the mayor, with myself, with senior officials, police chief, fire chief, paramedic chief, etc., medical officer of health. When are you going to have that first press conference to get the information out? All the social media management, the media management, the resident information management. Our corporate communication team was working around the clock. We had to bring in extra people to support them. And they end up bearing probably the biggest weight in terms of directing, in terms of communicating to the community, what to do, what's next, what to expect, managing expectations, managing council's expectations, giving councillors information that they could share with their constituents on all their web pages, and it's an incredible, especially tweeting, and an incredible effort to manage it. And it's the most critical. We've recognized now, after having many emergencies in Ottawa. We've had a lot in the last 20 years. That communications and the focus on that, and we've changed it where our communications senior director is now part of the senior leadership team on responding to any emergency. So they're not coming in after the fact. They are called in. That director is called in the moment everyone else, the fire chief, police chief, myself, when we're called in, she arrives at the same time, and she's rolling with her team. And they've had to sustain a huge effort because the regular communications goes on in the organization. So they've been in that same place. And the hardest part of all this is getting people to rotate themselves out and let someone else step in. People don't want to leave.
Yeah.
They'll keep working and working and working, and then they crash, and then their judgment starts suffering, and they start making mistakes because they just get exhausted, and there's so much coming at them. And one of the lessons we learned from a couple of years ago, the flood, is that we have to be diligent about forcing people to rotate themselves out and take a break.
Because sometimes, you kind of get an adrenaline rush too, right? And you don't recognize it at the time that, wow, you've gone past the point where you should have.
Yeah,
Checked
that's a really good point, because I think what people will tell you, even though it's hard work, their most rewarding moments in their career is when they're involved in an emergency. It's terrible for the people that are the victims of the emergency, but the people that are responding find it the most rewarding, exhilarating experience, because the process is all gone from the perspective of people are actioning things. Decisions are made quickly. They're actioning. They've got full authority to make the decisions and move forward. And people are just exhilarated by just being in that kind of environment. And they don't want to step out. To your point, they don't want to leave. It's like an adrenaline rush.
Kind of type A people. There
are a lot of type A people, and they don't want to leave. And next thing you know, you see them getting sick, and they're not performing well, and because they're just exhausted. Right, your mind isn't as sharp. So that was a big lesson for us.
So you've done some innovative stuff kind of on the HR side as well, around your staff and management development.
Yes.
Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Well, one of the things that when I got back about 3 years ago, council was really concerned about succession planning. We're no different than any other city or town, large or small. A lot of our staff, our demographics, I think the average age of our managers has just turned 50. So people are in the last few years of their career, and so we have a big, group that are going to be leaving. Council is very worried about succession planning, especially at the senior leadership level, at the general manager level, which is the level that reports to the city manager, and at a director level. And they asked me when I came back to take that as a mandate, as one of my mandates to bring back. And we had done succession planning at the City of Ottawa, but like many organizations, it was very much a paper exercise, and it was very much based on judgment. About, I had a group of people who I thought were ready to replace me or replace other jobs, and you'd have conversation, and everyone put their names forward, and it became kind of this, listing of people that just was on a list, but nothing was ever done to prepare them other than we had a list of potential names to replace. But in action, it never worked, and so we brought in a firm, and they're actually here at the trade show called Predictive Success. And they have it's sort of a psychometric test where you answer 2 questions, and it gives you a leadership profile, and it's graphed. Your leadership profile is actually graphed, and you can compare yourself to leaders from hundreds of thousands of other leaders around the world in various jobs, and you can also do a leadership profile for an actual job. And what we've done, there was a lot of people were very tentative about this because they thought they're going to be exposed and how's it going to be used and all the rest of it. Yeah. But what we did with that, we brought in a whole coaching philosophy, and we said that we're not doing performance appraisals anymore from the perspective of check all the boxes, and if you check all the boxes you get a raise. If you're on the track of poor performance, we would deal with that. But for everyone else, they were personal development reviews, and it was all about coaching. And we took their leadership profile, matched it against the job that they were seeking, and then looked at what are the gaps in the leadership competencies that they need to work on, and then develop coaching plans and personal development plans that would actually force them to start addressing their gaps that they were interested in moving these positions. And so now our entire training package, our human resources group redid our entire training package. It's very much based on experiential learning, 70% experiential, 30% classroom. Stretch assignments, coaching training, how to be a coach has become the norm, and we're driving that into the organization. And we now have a successor pool who have all completed the predictive success psychometric test, and who all have a profile and all have a development plan that they're working on in terms of preparing them to be able to take on leadership positions. So it's been a major shift, and we're testing it now. I'm losing, I just lost one general manager. We moved a new person in. I'm losing our CFO, general manager at the end of the year. We're hiring for a CIO, we're hiring for a CFO, we're hiring for a city solicitor. So we're hiring for some senior positions, but we have a strong pool of people. And we went to Ottawa U, the Telford Business School, and actually developed a 1-week leadership program that addresses their leadership gaps based on their profile. And they also had to do a 360 to identify how their peers and subordinate superiors thought of them. And that went into the development program too. So we're really pushing practical learning to help people develop and overcome gaps that they may have, rather than send them on 3-week courses to learn about everything. It's focused very much on the individual.
Fantastic. And do you think this is going to help too? I mean, often the reason folks leave is because they don't believe there's an opportunity for them,
Yes.
that they've been, kind of shut out of opportunity. This is really saying, if you're interested in a thing, the answer is not no, but it's maybe if we can fill in some of these things.
It's exactly that. We've basically said, because one of the first decisions we had to make was, does everybody in our extended senior leadership team, we have 65 directors in the organization, are they all going to be eligible for succession planning, or only some based on how we're rating them? And we made the decision that everybody's eligible. They're just at a different timeline of their eligibility. Some people need 5 years of development because where they are in their career and the experiences they've had. Some people are within a year. So we categorized everybody between 0 to 1 years, 1 to 2 years, and 3 to 5 years. And based on where you're at, you got a different program or a different set of training and coaching that you would get to help you get there. But our view is that everybody's potentially ready if they want it. It's just what did they invest in and what opportunities they have, because we want people to stay. It's so hard to hire. I mean, I think that one of the challenges we've had, and I think most municipalities have, you're seeing a lot of people cycle through, and I think it's worse now with the review that's happening in particularly in the GTA around the regions and the provincial government review that's happening. And I saw it happen when Ottawa amalgamated in 2000. I was there. A lot of people, senior people, who were planning to retire or planning to move on and open up opportunities stayed.
Yes.
And they stayed because they were waiting to see what would happen, whether there'd be buyouts, so
Sure.
a lot of movement stopped. And I think you're going to see a shortage of really experienced people willing to move and go anywhere, especially from the GTA corridor in Ontario, and that's one of our big pools of people that we draw from. So we are really invested in keeping our people, their experience, they know the city, and try to develop from within. That is really our objective.
So that's a great tribute, I think, to your leadership too.
Well, thank you.
It's an insightful approach. Big things happening again this summer in Ottawa. Once everything's cleaned up, you'll be welcoming the world and leaders from all over Ontario again in August.
Yes.
The Association of Municipalities of Ontario is going to be there.
Yes, and we've been hosting AMO. We've been hosting. We had FCM, I think, a couple of years ago. We have a lot of people that come through the city. I think it's wonderful that we're able to attract the conferences and have people there. I know our council, all look forward to participate in it. I know the FCM, there's a lot of people coming here and to Quebec City, I think today or tomorrow. A lot of them arriving tonight and tomorrow.
Yes.
And especially now, I think the municipal sector, is going through a change. I think that our politics is getting different. I think the trickle down from federal and provincial is landing here. I mean, we had an interesting session at the conference here on populism and what's that mean for councils and what's it mean for staff, and we're all adjusting to something that's happening and moving right beneath our feet. And I don't know where it's going to go, but I think the coming to conferences like this, the FCM, AMO, the groups that come together and they can have those dialogues, it makes you more aware of your context when you talk to people. Like I'm talking to people from Alberta and BC, and you like to think, a lot of people like to pigeonhole us and think we're different. There's a lot of similarities happening across this country, whether it's East Coast, West Coast, Central Canada. There's so much we have in common, and I find it fascinating when you start that. And whether you're a small town or a big city,
Absolutely.
a lot of people I'd say, oh, you're big. We don't have you don't have our problems. We don't have your problems. We can't relate to each other. It's not true.
No.
It's not
Great.
true. I often think that, and I said this to one of the fellows I was having lunch with today, that being in a smaller city, in a smaller municipality, I think it's harder being a CAO or city manager in one of those than it is being a large city, because you really are doing everything. You're expected to know a lot more. I think you're expected to give out more guidance yourself to council. I have a big group of people, very experienced group of people with a lot of skill sets that we can draw on.
Yeah.
That advise council and deal directly with council. But when you're in a smaller municipality, it's on you, and I think it's a really difficult job to find good people that can do that.
Yeah, I agree. It's a wide skill set that's required, and you carry it all on your shoulders with a small amount of support. So,
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for coming in to chat with us. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate this.
I'm Susan Gardner for Municipal World, here with Steve Kanellakos from City of Ottawa. We share your stories.